Alright, my friends, it is once again time to make the Oathbreaker Knight as sad as possible. Notice that this is with no pre-buffing done ahead of time, though of course we could have extra actions with haste, or even a third bonus action if we'd precast Wholeness of Body. We're going to go ahead and start with a Stunning Strike, because we don't want him to fight back, if at all possible. Now, he did save against the first Stunning Strike, but since we have an extra attack, we can simply try again. Let's go ahead and block that extra damage, because why not? And the Oathbreaker Knight has become stunned. We can now add some extra damage from Withering Cut, in addition to the extra sneak attack damage that we were able to add earlier. Having done that, but the Oathbreaker Knight is stunned and can't really fight back, but let's make things worse for him by adding in a disarm from Flick of the Wrist, knocking his weapon out of his hand and doing even more damage, but let's make that even worse and knock him prone as well with Flurry of Blows Topple. So now the Oathbreaker Knight is stunned, disarmed, and proned, and we have many more options for how sad we want to make him, preventing any enemies from ever fighting back against you. Alright, let's get to the build. Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering a build I've been having an absolutely incredible time with, which I'm calling the All-Purpose Combat Master. In addition to dealing excellent damage and being extremely difficult to kill, this build can make enemies sad in an incredible variety of exciting ways. We can stun them, we can disarm them, we can blind them, we can knock them down prone to the ground or knock them flying into space, we can stagger them, we can even just call them names if we just want to hurt them emotionally. This build does everything, so you'll always have a ton of options in combat, and you'll dance in and out of fights, disabling, disarming, and distracting enemies to the point where they can no longer retaliate against you at all. In addition to all of this, we get to use a class that normally is kind of one-dimensional and comes with a lot of balance problems in an extremely fun and exciting way that really uses its unique mechanics in a way that doesn't get seen otherwise, and makes the character just, from a mechanical sense, really neat as well. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Tarantula for the $10 donation, How Hard Can It Be 404 for the extremely generous €50, Sky Jordan King for the $2, Nanowe for the $10, and Zelesta for the $5, as well as Douglas Fugate and Steven Sayeg for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. It really means so much to me. I'm sorry I'm so far behind on saying thank you, but I really do appreciate it. Alright, let's get to the build. I'm using Astarion as the example character here, because this is in part a rogue build, and he's of course the rogue of the party, and also from a mechanical standpoint, he's one of the strongest possible ways to create this build. Astarion gets bonuses to hit in the early game, and we're making a lot of attacks, so those are incredibly powerful, and his endgame boosts to all of his weapon and unarmed damage will be incredibly strong for this character as well, because we just make so many attacks, so he can boost our damage output with this character tremendously. In a similar sense, building this character on Karlach also works incredibly well, because her soul coins will work on unarmed strikes. They're actually bugged and give you double the effectiveness on unarmed strikes even without rage, so you can get a ton of extra damage playing this build with Karlach as well. I also think that it fits pretty well for Lae'zel, just from a flavor perspective, so any of those make great options. If you're building this as a custom character, medium armor proficiency is extremely powerful, so playing as a Githyanki is excellent, or a shield dwarf, but Githyanki also get extra skills, which can make you a better party face and everything along those lines, as well as the extra mobility from Misty Step and Enhanced Leap. Or the extra mobility from Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf are excellent as well, and playing a High Elf or High Half Elf can get you Booming Blade, which is an incredibly powerful ability for any melee character. This is especially true if you're playing Astarion as an origin character, because if he's your main character, you can change his High Elf cantrip at the beginning of the game to be Booming Blade, giving you even more damage output. So those would be my picks in order to maximize the character's potential. What race you pick is not incredibly important, but those will give you some significant edges. At first level, we're going to be starting with a level of Rogue. This character is going to take both Rogue and Monk levels, but starting with Rogue allows us to provide all the skills and utility that our party needs as well. Since we're going to be taking Charisma for some of our abilities, we can act as the party face, because Rogue gets skill expertise, so we can have Persuasion expertise and be better at dialogue skills, even than much more Charisma-based characters. As well, starting with Rogue lets us be the party's lockpicker, so we don't need to fill those roles elsewhere in the party. If you're really intending to make no skill checks with this character, you can start with the Monk levels instead, but the 1-level Rogue dip at the beginning just gives you so much more utility for your party that I find it plays out much more smoothly to take it at first level. As a Rogue, we're going to take 16 in Dexterity and 16 in Constitution. This character gets pretty good hit points throughout the entire game, as well as 12 Wisdom and 14 Charisma. Since we don't intend to be unarmored for most of the game, we don't need to have particularly high Wisdom despite being a monk. Now, you can play this as an unarmored character, especially if you are not intending to do any skill checks. You can drop Constitution to 14, drop Charisma to 12, and take 16 Wisdom, and then you can play this as an unarmored character, and that also has a lot of advantages. You can even play this as a Tavern Brawler character, though that if you're doing that, then I suggest leaving Strength at 8 and just using Strength Elixirs rather than replacing Strength. One of the nice things about this character, though, is that we don't require any gimmicks in order to be extremely powerful. We don't need elixirs or stat items of any kind. We're very independent, so this is the attribute split that I recommend. For our skill selection here, we're going to go ahead and take Persuasion Expertise, because as a rogue, this will allow us to make all of the dialogue checks in the early game. And then, of course, Sleight of Hand Expertise makes us excellent at lockpicking as well. Those are the two main out-of-combat utility skills that a party needs. And then you can round that out with another dialogue skill if you want to be able to do more dialogue checks, and take Acrobatics and Stealth to give you some more options for moving around the battlefield, and to prevent enemies from pushing you around, because it's your job to push them, not vice versa. That's all the decisions that we have to make as a rogue at first level, so let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we're immediately going to be exiting rogue and starting to take levels in monk. We want to get our next power spike as soon as possible, and monk gives us a ton of stuff at level 1, and then also will get us extra attack as quickly as possible, getting it at level 5, whereas rogue never does. So this will give us the smoothest power progression over the course of the game. It is worth mentioning that if you're a player who respecs extremely frequently, like every level, then you'll be strongest at exactly level 4 with 4 levels of rogue. So you can build rogue up to level 4 and then respec to this build at level 5 if you want. It's certainly not necessary, but that is a small optimization you can do if you're a player who respecs really frequently. In addition to getting to our power spikes sooner, monk also gives us a ton of stuff when we initially grab it. Firstly, we get Flurry of Blows, giving us 3 attacks if we want to spend a key point, 1 with our main hand and 2 unarmed strikes with our offhand. So we're doing more attacks and more damage than just about any other character in the early game. We also get Dexterous Attacks, which is actually very relevant for this character because we're going to be using a lot of weapons in the early game and throughout the game. And at this point, we might have weapon proficiency in some pretty powerful weapons that don't normally use dexterity. Astarion, for example, as a high elf, has longsword proficiency. Being able to attack with that using our dexterity is actually incredibly strong for the early game and can increase our damage output by a fairly significant margin. So martial arts dexterous attacks is very, very useful for this character. We also get the bonus Unarmed Strike, so when we attack with a monk weapon, we get an extra bonus action Unarmed Strike, which just increases our damage output immensely by doubling the number of attacks we're making, even in turns where we're not spending key points on Flurry of Blows. We do get unarmored defense as well, which in the early game may be higher armor class than using light armor, so it's worth keeping in mind that unarmored defense may give you higher AC depending on what gear you have available at that point. In the end game, we're going to be armored, but throughout your character progression, you may prefer unarmored defense in the early game as well. So monk gives you just a lot of additional tools right away. At character level 2, we get to take our second level of Monk, which gives us Patient Defense, Step of the Wind Dash, and Step of the Wind Disengage. These are pretty powerful abilities. They do cost key points, so you have to be a little more sparing with the dashes and disengages than you will when we get the rogue versions of those abilities later on. But these can still get you out of a bad situation in a pinch, or give you a little bit of extra reach to reach a low health enemy that you need to punch. All of those are extremely useful tools. Patient Defense you usually won't want to spend a bonus action on, because it's usually better to just use your bonus action to hit the enemy. But there are some circumstances where this comes up, so obviously having all of these abilities is pretty helpful. At character level 4, we get to take our third monk level, choosing our monk subclass, and the subclass that we're going to take is the Way of the Open Hand. In Baldur's Gate 3, open hand monks are often seen as broken tavern brawler builds, which can sometimes take away from the awesome, unique mechanics of this character, because Tavern Brawler has such serious balance issues that builds that use it just become all about Tavern Brawler and not about being the martial arts master that the Way of the Open Hand monks should be. But when built as a dexterity monk, you really get that feeling of being an incredible kung fu martial arts master, able to just outmaneuver enemies and use the discipline and strength of your body to defeat them in a myriad and hilarious ways. The Open Hand Monk gets special flurry of blows, so when you use your bonus action and a key point, you can knock enemies prone, send them flying into space or off a cliff or into a wall of fire put down by an ally, or stagger them, preventing them from reacting, which lets you slip away with no retaliation, prevent enemies from using counter spells with like a quick throat punch. So you really feel like you are getting to play as Jackie Chan rather than just cruise through the game blasting enemies with overpowered damage. So it really makes you engage with the combat more when you build the character as a dexterity character, and it's absolutely incredible to play while also being still extraordinarily powerful. So Way of the Open Hand Monk shines, I think, most in dexterity-based builds. And another fun thing about taking Open Hand Monk here is that for those of you who, like me, were somewhat disappointed with the Way of the Drunken Master, this build is kind of like build your own Drunken Master, except it's actually good. We get to do all of the awesome maneuvering in combat that the Drunken Master is supposed to do, but in a way that's actually extremely effective. So it's, I think, a really fun build both from a gameplay sense and from a conceptual sense. At character level 5, we're taking our fourth level of Monk, and we get to take our first feat. Now there's actually a bunch of options here, depending on how you intend to build your character. Of course, we are going to be making a lot of unarmed attacks, so Tavern Brawler plus using Strength Elixirs will increase the power level of the build significantly. If you do that, you can drop Constitution by 1, put a point into Constitution, and then put those extra 2 points elsewhere into Wisdom or Charisma, and then drink Strength Elixirs every day in order to do more damage and have more accuracy with your unarmed strikes. Definitely an option for players who want to power up the build and don't mind drinking an elixir every day, and of course the mechanically most powerful option because Tavern Brawler is just that extremely powerful. Another great option, if you are intending to get Ethel's Hair and boost your dexterity, is to take Moderately Armored. This character can use medium armor proficiency extremely well, which is why I recommended races that get it also, because we are not going to be playing unarmored for most of the game and benefit from just having higher armor class. There's a bunch of medium armor sets that we can use that will make us even harder to kill. The natural pick, though, is just to take an ability score improvement to boost our dexterity. Hit chance, armor class, and initiative are all incredibly important for this character, so without the stat items, that is what I would do, but if you're intending to use some stat items on this character, you do open up a bunch more options. At level 6, we get to take Monk level 5, getting extra attack and Stunning Strike. So this gives us even more tools for disabling enemies. Stunning Strike is probably the single most powerful disable in the entire game, except possibly Mantle of Majesty or Arcane Acuity commands, but because it only takes part of your action to use, it's just ridiculously strong, and it takes a resource that at this point in the game is barely a resource at all. We have a ton of key points and they refresh on a short rest, so we can stun lots of enemies, and the ones that we don't want to stun, we can punt off of cliffs or knock prone. So we can spend our key points extremely freely on both doing tons of damage and disabling enemies very easily. We also, of course, get extra attack, which not only gives us more opportunities to stun, it also just increases our damage output enormously, especially because we're still able to use weapons to do a ton of extra damage. So Monk level 5, obviously a massive power spike every time, and this character is no exception. At character level 7, we're going to go ahead and take one more Monk level, because Open Hand Monk gets yet more awesome features at this level. We get the manifestations of body, mind, or soul, which increase the damage output of our unarmed strikes significantly, which is, of course, excellent for a character that's going to be making a lot of unarmed strikes. Now, obviously, our wisdom is a little bit lower than most Open Hand Monk builds, so we aren't getting quite as much flat damage, but the important part here is the extra d4 anyways, because that will be doubled on critical hits. Works well with a lot of other tools because the specific elemental damage types matter a lot. Radiant damage opens up the option to use a ton of different items, and psychic damage works very well if you have a resonant stone build in your party as well, so the fact that we get this extra damage increases our damage output enormously. But the real prize here is hitting wholeness of body. This lets you spend an action for 3 turns to regain your hit key points and heal a bunch, but also for 3 turns have an additional bonus action. This build uses its bonus actions better than just about any other character in the entire game. We can flurry with our bonus actions, and as we level up in Rogue, we're going to be able to use the Swashbuckler abilities with bonus actions as well. So having a second one makes us incredibly more powerful. Wholeness of body is a ludicrously strong tool for this character. Now, you do have to be a little bit careful with this because it does heal you. And if you're using the Helmet of Grit, you want to stay below half health so that you can have an extra bonus action from that. So with Wholeness of Body and the Helmet of Grit, you do have to be a little bit more careful about managing your hit points because it's easy to accidentally heal over the 50% HP threshold and not get a third bonus action. But this is still an incredibly strong tool, so definitely worth using and worth a little bit of managing of hit points to make use of it. At level 8, we're going to we've gotten all of the best things from Monk with 6 levels, so we're going to go back for some more powerful Rogue abilities. With level 2 of Rogue, we get Cunning Action, Dash, Hide, and Disengage. Now, obviously, we've had the ability to spend a key point for the Dash and Disengage already, and those come with free jumps, so they're also useful in some circumstances where the Cunning Actions aren't, but the fact that these are free is still extremely useful. And Cunning Action Hide is incredibly strong throughout the entire game. It lets you get away from enemies and prevent them from retaliating against you if you're vulnerable. Around this point in the game, you're starting to think about using the Helmet of Grit probably as well, so you're going to be at 50% HP a lot of the time. So the ability to hide and prevent enemies from retaliating against you in longer fights can be extremely helpful. Bonus action Hide lets you do that. And of course, this just makes you even more mobile, gives you even more combat options. These abilities are just, as always, incredibly strong. At level 9, we get to take our 3rd level of Rogue and pick our Rogue subclass, the Swashbuckler. This gives us a couple things right away. So firstly, we get Fancy Footwork, which is going to let us move in and out of combat even more easily. While Open Hand Monk can already stagger enemies and prevent them from reacting, you would rather use your Flurry ability on a more impactful debuff. And so Fancy Footwork can let you punch one enemy off a cliff and then hit the other enemy and walk away without triggering attacks of opportunity from either of them. This gives you a lot of extra mobility in combat without having enemies be able to react to it, so it lets you just move around the battlefield more easily. The real advantage, though, is Rakish Audacity. +2 to your initiative rolls is an incredible boost for this character. We're a dexterity-based character, so this lets us skip alert, which is why I didn't mention that earlier as a feat that we should take, because we've got +6 already to our initiative, and it will just increase as we continue to take more dexterity as we level up. We can boost it through gear, so we're going to hit +9 or +10 very, very easily without investing in alert at all. We also get to sneak attack even without advantage, which is relevant for this character. We now have 2d6 of sneak attack damage. We're going to critically hit a lot, so those extra sneak attack dice do come up, and Rakish Audacity helps with those as well. At character level 10, we're taking our 4th level of Swashbuckler, and we get all of the dirty tricks. Now, in order to use these, at least Flick of the Wrist, we need to have a finesse weapon equipped. So if we've been using a non-finesse weapon up to this point, then you're going to need a finesse weapon. But this gives you a ton of extra incredible debuff options with your bonus actions. You can disarm an enemy with Flick of the Wrist, or you can blind an enemy with Sand Toss. Flick of the Wrist, the save DC against the disarm is based on your charisma, which is why we have high charisma, but Sand Toss, for whatever reason, uses your dexterity for the save DC, which is going to be really high. So we now have a very reliable 2-turn blind as a bonus action, in addition to all of the other debuffs that we get. So not only can we spend key points to do a lot of debuffing, or we can use our main actions to stun enemies with Stunning Strike. We can also use our bonus actions to apply even more debuffs to an enemy. An enemy who's prone and disarmed also will usually just skip their turn entirely, because they're going to stand up and then spend, so they can't move, and then spend an action picking up their weapon. So that's effectively a stun that you can do if you have 2 bonus actions, which this character gets both from monk abilities and possibly from items as well. Also, Vicious Mockery is just funny, and getting to hear different characters yell their Vicious Mockery lines is just great. For our feat selection at this level, we're just going to take an ability improvement and boost our dexterity up to 20. This gives us the highest initiative, armor class, damage, etc., so obviously is the natural choice. At character level 11, we've gotten the most powerful tools for this character, so there's actually a lot of different directions that we can go with our last 2 levels, depending on how you want the character to play out for the endgame. I'll start with the level dips. So we could take 2 levels of Fighter. This gets us medium armor proficiency, which I've mentioned before as being really good for the character, and fighting style, as well as a bonus action heal for yet more ways to use your bonus action, and of course, action surge. This is obviously incredibly strong for pretty much any character and gives you even more burst damage. I will say one of the nice things about this character is that you almost never have to rest, and having to use Action Surge does make you want to short rest a little more often, but that's still an extremely powerful tool. 2 levels of Barbarian can get you Rage for even more damage and some damage resistance to make you tankier, and 2 levels of Druid for Spore Druid can get you Symbiotic Entity to make each of your attacks do an extra d6 of damage, as well as giving you a bunch of utility spells from Druid, like Enhanced Leap and Longstrider, to make you even better at moving around the battlefield. We can also, rather than multi-classing, take more levels in either of our existing classes. 2 more levels of Rogue gets you Uncanny Dodge to take even less damage from enemy attacks, as well as an extra initiative from Rakish Audacity, which gives you a +3 bonus at Rogue level 5. Instead of the +2 that we already have. And then at Rogue level 6, we also get some more skill expertises, so you can be even better at being in charge of skills for your party. I think the most natural pick is just 2 more levels of Monk, though. You get Evasion, you get more key points, which are incredibly relevant to the party, or to the character. You get Stillness of Mind, which has its upsides and downsides, because it casts automatically, so it can take your turn when you don't want it to, but it does let you break out of these conditions, but getting Evasion makes you significantly harder to kill through damage spells, and the extra key points just make you also much, much better at sustaining, and not resting is one of the really powerful things about this character, so I like just finishing off with 2 monk levels, but there's a ton of different options, and you can customize the character in a lot of different ways. And finally, at character level 12, we're going to take our 8th monk level, getting an extra key point, and, of course, another feat. There's a lot of different feats that you can take at this level, and many different options that are all excellent, so I'll talk a little bit about those. Firstly, I've already mentioned Moderately Armored and Tavern Brawler as both being incredibly strong, and those are still, of course, incredibly strong, especially if you're using stat items to support them. Alert is still always good, even though we have +7 to initiative from just our levels and dexterity, and are probably going to get more from items. Alert will just let you go before even the fastest enemies in the game, which of course is always very nice. We can also just take an ability score improvement. Extra charisma can help our swashbuckler abilities land more easily, and extra wisdom increases our damage output from our open hand monk abilities, as well as also giving us better wisdom saving throws, which of course are very relevant. Even +2 to constitution gives you some extra hit points, though if you're going to do that, then you should probably take tough instead, because it's like a +4 boost to con, and also works with items that increase your con if you're going to do that. Savage Attacker doesn't work for your unarmed strikes, but does work for your weapon attacks, so can be a reasonable boost to your damage. Mobile gives you additional movement speed, and Mage Slayer lets you shut down mage enemies much better as well. But the feat that I think is my favorite is for even more battlefield control, and that is Sentinel. This gives you the ability to just stop enemies from moving, so while you have the choice to do that with a lot of your active abilities, just passively putting this character next to enemies and shutting them down even further is both very flavorful for the type of character that it is and very powerful. So there's a lot of different options, but Sentinel is just an awesome feat that gives you so many tactical choices and works very well for a character like this, which with good armor class, hit points, and damage, so is what I'm going to recommend taking here. Alright, my friends, that is the Kung Fu Combat Master, and of course, I hope that you have a blast playing it just as I have been, but we can obviously make the character much more powerful with items, so let's talk about those. For items for this character, we have a ton of items that we can use, but one of the nice things about this character is that you can equip it with a lot of items that other party members don't really need specifically, so you can have this character equipped extremely powerfully, but without stealing items from the rest of your party. Let's start with weapons. So in order to make this build work, of course, we need a finesse weapon in order to attack with in order to use Flick of the Wrist, which is an incredibly powerful ability. The best finesse weapon, I think, for this character is the Duelist Prerogative. We don't mind having an empty offhand, and the extra reaction is extremely powerful if you went the Sentinel route when you took feats, because that's going to let you get 2 opportunity attacks every turn. Also, the bonus crit chance and the extra damage are really good with the Duelist Prerogative, so this gives you a lot of options. Other really strong finesse weapons are also good here. The Knife of the Undermountain King, which you get fairly early in the game, increases your crit chance, gives you advantage, and gives you the additional hit chance and damage, so is always an extremely powerful choice. And then in the later game, the Crimson Mischief and the Blade of the First Blood can be used. You can use both of these at once, though you won't typically be making offhand attacks with a weapon, since you'll be using those either to do a dirty trick or to use a flurry of blows. But you can still use these weapons paired, or you can just use one of them in your main hand. The Crimson Mischief does a bunch of extra damage. The Blade of the First Blood can give enemies vulnerability to piercing damage in your main hand. So if you're not using the Ballast Armor, then this can be an extremely powerful tool as well. This character can also benefit, of course, from the best light armor in the game, the Ballast Armor, because almost all of our damage is going to be piercing damage. Yes, it is true that we do a lot of bludgeoning damage as well with our unarmed strikes, but for our actual damage output, a lot of it's going to be our main hand damage, and giving enemies vulnerability, of course, is going to be incredibly strong. So the Ballast Armor is really good as well. But because this character is less focused on piercing damage than a lot of other builds, we can also use the Elegant Studded Leather for a bonus to initiative and a more defensive take on the character, especially because this character is more about avoiding some of the most meta and broken mechanics, which obviously the Ballast Armor falls into very easily. For our helmet selection, I think there are 2 main choices. The Mask of Soul Perception gives us bonus to attack rolls and initiative rolls, which is incredible for this character, and the Helmet of Grit. If you don't mind playing at 50% hit points, which given how mobile this character is and how good it is at shutting down enemies, is not particularly risky, especially with evasion from your monk levels, then the extra bonus action is absurd. This character uses bonus actions better than pretty much any other character in the game with the amount of damage that you can do and the wealth of crowd control options that you have available from them. So the Helmet of Grit is just absolutely incredible on this character. A lot of monk builds can't use this item because they're unarmored builds, but since we intend to wear armor, the light armor aspect of the Helmet of Grit doesn't hurt us at all, so we can get the full benefit of this extraordinarily strong item without giving up anything that we actually care about. We also benefit extremely heavily from bows that give us passive effects, like the Hellrider Longbow's bonus to initiative, or the Deadshot's bonus to critical hits, but we're also a dexterity-based character, so you can also just have this character use either one of these bows like the Deadshot and just make ranged attacks with the Deadshot, or a pair of hand crossbows. Since we're going to be playing with extra bonus actions from the Helmet of Grit, we can use a pair of hand crossbows like the Nairmisser and the Hellfire hand crossbow, or the Hellfire and the hand crossbow +2 if we're doing the ballast armor thing, in order to also make ranged attacks. You can even take Sharpshooter as your third feat and give this character a whole pretty powerful set of ranged tools. Obviously, you're still going to be mostly a melee character, but having the option to fight at ranged can be very strong as well. So that's an extremely versatile way to build the character. For our amulet selection, the Amulet of Greater Health is awesome. This character does benefit very heavily from items that let you replace your stats, because if we can drop our Constitution to 8, wear the Amulet of Greater Health, and then put those points into Charisma and Wisdom, it boosts our character's core stats immensely, so obviously this is super powerful, and of course gives us even more hit points to play with. Even at 50% hit points for the Helmet of Grit, this character with the Amulet of Greater Health has almost 70 hit points, so you're still a pretty tough character to take down, just in terms of your hit point total. You know, you're equivalent to a wizard, while at half hit points if you're using the Amulet of Greater Health. Other options include the Amulet of the Harpers. This just gives you shield and advantage on wisdom saves, although the tooltip says wisdom saving throws checks, but it is advantage on wisdom saves, which is pretty helpful for this character. Also, of course, wisdom saving throws are one of the things that is a little dangerous to you, and shield gives you a great defensive reaction, goes really well with the Duel's Prerogative extra reaction as well, or extra mobility from the Amulet of Misty Step is also really good. For your rings, you're just going to want defensive options, rings and cloak in general. Defensive options like the ring and cloak of protection are really nice just to make the character a little bit stronger, or items that increase your damage output like the Callous Glow Ring. We're making a lot of attacks, so the Callous Glow Ring will trigger really frequently, and because it's radiant damage, that does work with our radiant damage passive from Manifestation of Soul if we want to do that, so you can build the character to apply radiating orb debuffs as well. You can even use the Luminous Gloves, which don't always go on other Radiating Orb characters. This character can use them very easily, because you're going to be dealing a lot of radiant damage to stack Radiating Orbs and debuff enemies even more. The Helldusk Gloves are also excellent, or the lesser Helldusk Gloves as well, because these boost both your melee attacks with weapons and your unarmed strikes, and we're doing both. So these are the natural pick for this character, because you use both halves of the buff from this item in an extremely effective way. Another cool set of gloves that you can use on this character as well is the Martial Exertion Gloves. This gives you an extra attack with Martial Exertion, which is going to be a lot of extra damage, and can be handy. The self-damage from this can be handy, because if you accidentally heal over 50% hit points and turn off the Helmet of Grit extra bonus action, the Martial Exertion Gloves can sometimes help you just get that back. Like, let's say you're in a fight where you have NPC allies, and one of them throws a healing potion at you that you weren't expecting, and turns off one of your bonus actions. You can use this in response to that to free action lower your HP back below the threshold to get the extra bonus, so that's actually pretty helpful as well. The Boots of Uninhibited Kushigo increase your damage output with your unarmed strikes, which we're doing a lot, especially if you've boosted your wisdom, then these can be very helpful. Otherwise, the Misty Step boots can also be really good. In general, if you're using stat items and increasing your wisdom, then the Boots of Uninhibited Kushigo are going to be the best, because they're just going to give you even more damage. There's also a couple powerful items that you can use if you have medium armor proficiency, either because you took levels in fighter, barbarian, or druid, or because you are playing one of the races that gets it. The medium armors that give you your full dexterity modifier to your armor class are obviously excellent for this character and let you get extremely high armor class, with the armor of agility in particular, giving you really high AC, and +2 to your saving throws. Again, this character is hard to kill with attacks because you can so often disarm enemies or run away from where they can attack you. So saving throws are one of the things that we're more concerned about. Boosts to those are really good. The Helm of Baldurin is also a really nice option if you have medium armor proficiency. If you want a more defensive take on the character, the extra healing works pretty well, given that you're not going to be taking that much damage, so it'll keep you topped off all the time. And the AC saving throws and stun and crit immunity mean that you are just much less likely to die to random nonsense, so it makes this character vastly, vastly safer. Unfortunately, you can't use the Helm of Baldurin and the Helmet of Grit at the same time because you don't have two heads. These items would synergize pretty well because crit immunity is really good with the Helmet of Grit. If you want to use crit immunity from an armor piece or a shield, the adamantine armor or shield are pretty nice for critical hit immunity alongside the Helmet of Grit as well, though they do require juggling your items around because the shield can't be used as a duelist prerogative. You need shield proficiency from either levels in fighter or other things like that. So that's an option. It does require bending the build a little bit more. Finally, it's worth mentioning that stat items are just incredible for this character. You can use the elixirs of Hill or Cloud Giant Strength to key all of your damage off of strength. Even with high dexterity, this will improve your damage output and hit chance because you're going to be using your strength for it. And of course, if you took Tavern Brawler, you're going to want to use strength elixirs in order to maximize your hit chance and damage, which obviously is incredible for any monk character in Baldur's Gate 3. Any character that can use Tavern Brawler becomes stronger by drinking elixirs and using it. The Graceful Cloth can be perfect if you're playing in a more unarmored style, especially in the early and mid game. Increasing your dexterity is excellent and lets you get more feats, and the Gloves of Dexterity can also let you drop your dexterity if you want higher wisdom and charisma. I don't recommend these for this character, but they are definitely an option. Also, in order to be a better party face, the Warped Headband of Intellect, before you get more powerful helmets, is a pretty nice choice for this character as well, because it will let you use your intelligence skills alongside your charisma skills in order to get better dialogue choices, and be able to pass knowledge checks and stuff, in addition to being able to pass persuasion checks. But the main goal for this character is to build defensive stats, such as armor class and saving throw boosts, and offensive stats, in other words, increases to your damage output with your weapon attacks or unarmed strikes, or both, in order to just maximize the effectiveness of the character, and boosts to your chance to hit enemies are always excellent as well. Alright, my friends, hope that you've enjoyed this look at the all-purpose combat master, and I hope that you have as much fun playing this character as I have. Honestly, having so many cool things that you can do every single turn of combat has just been an absolute treat, and I really enjoy that it plays the way that I wished Drunken Master Monk played out, so I've been finding this build to be incredibly fun to play. As always, of course, if you have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit like, helps me out with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.